Certain dafim were worthy, but certain dafim. You never get like, this is the longest, I think, where you get like one daf after the next, which is hard. You don't get it so often. No, you don't get like daf after daf. No, two towers, the whole we say this. Okay. Morning, Sean. Right.
Morning.
But 8 past. Should we just start? Let's start. It's not awesome. We're up to Daf Chof Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. I'd like to try and finish the perek. I haven't got so long. So it's not awesome. We learned the Mishnah there. Sheret Shlimsa B'Tanu. A dead reptile, which is a metame, which is found inside an oven. Hapash b'seiche shniyah. The bread becomes a sheni. Why does bread become a sheni? 4 lines from the bottom. Why is the bread a sheni? The oven becomes a rishon, and the oven spreads tumah to the bread. The bread, the oven becomes a rishon. Let's imagine that the tunnel is full of tumah, and as if the shell sticks up the whole space. We once asked this question. But to have a high pass to show what? And we should say, to have a high pass to show the bread should be a vision. What's the answer? Why is it not? Why don't we say that? Remember the answer? Rashi says it earlier. What's the answer? Why don't we say the pass is a vision? Let's imagine the oven is full of tumah. Let's imagine that the pass is a vision. Because we're going to have a special drasha that only food becomes tumah in an oven. And if it's true that the tumah spreads everywhere in the oven, we're up to Omalei, the second to bottom line. Omalei then. That can't be true. Why? The Tanya, you might have thought that even a vessel can become tumah in the airspace of a kli cheres, that even a vessel can become tumah. Talmud loima, top of Chaf Amud Beis. Anything which is inside it is tummy. And the pasuk then continues. Only food and not a keli. And since only food and not a keli, and we know that a keli can become a vision. So what's pshat that the keli doesn't become tummy? Teretz says the only way we can explain that is by saying that it becomes a sheni, and a keli doesn't become a sheni. So therefore, it's a raya that we don't assume that all the whole oven is full of tumah, and therefore it's only a sheni, and therefore the bread can become tumah, but not the keli. We've just explained that Rashi in the end of Parashat Shmini. Rashi at the end of Parashat Shmini goes through this Gemara in very brief words and says this cheshbon. Right. For the rest of a very long time now, we're going to have contradictions. We've had quite a number of Mishnayos and Braisos talk about tumah v'tara, and we're going to just ask contradictions and answers. Quite easy Gemara if you know the basics. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Shiur said that what? If you remember, that's quite a long time ago. Rabbi Shiur said, let's read the words and do it. Here, sorry. Rabbi Shiur said in our Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yosi anyway, that you're allowed to burn Sofek Tamir with Vadai Tumah, and Reza says you're not allowed to. Rav Chisda, Yomi, Pischa, Meshani asks the question as follows. Did Rabbi Yehuda say allowed to burn Sofek Tumah with Vadai Tumah? That's what he said in our Mishnah. Rabbi Yosi says you can't compare you. He's arguing the Amir. Why? If you're going to go from Chaninas Ganakoinim, he was talking about Tumah Kalo to Tumah Chamuro. That's why you're allowed to burn it together. Then we talk about a shlishi of a shemen with a shemen which is a vision. Zeh possible zeh atomic. I agree with you when it comes to vadai tumah. We're a lower level with a vadai tumah of a higher level. When the world would give you the right to burn sofik tumah with vadai tumah, nobody holds such a thing. Eliyahu Novi might come and say that the sofik tumah is not tumah at all, and they'll make it tumah. And if that's the case, how can you burn the two together? Which is an open contradiction to our Mishnah, in which Rabbi Yehuda says you are allowed to burn sofik tumah with vadai tumah. What? But from this brisa, wait a second. Here, because here we're talking about stam tuma. They were talking about. No, not about common Pesach. We're talking about truma. Truma could be any day of the year. Umeshani. It's a machlokes shittas Rabbi Yeshua. Shittas Rabbi Yeshua is what you're not allowed to burn even sofik with vadai. Shittas Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yeshua is allowed to burn sofik with vadai. And then more later is going to ask that our Mishnah is actually Rabbi Yossi speaking. We'll see. The Tanya. You burn everything before Shabbos, like this year. You'll burn on Friday, even though it's the 13th. Reserving tumos, temeos, teluyos, v'tohivos. You have to burn vadai tomei, vadai toy, and sofik tomei tuma. If they ask, you burn them all by themselves. You're not allowed to. Of course, you're not allowed to. And that you're allowed to. So that you don't burn it. That you don't burn toy and you don't burn tomei together. Sorry, you don't burn it together. That means you can't burn tehoya and tmeah together, and you can't burn teluya and tehoya together. You can't burn sofik and tehoya together. You can't burn vadai with a sofik. That means vadai tehoya with tmeah, of course not, and also not sofik tmeah with tehoya. That means, if you look very carefully, I didn't say it so well, but the Brisa says that according to Rabbi Shua finishes off, according to Rabbi Shimon finishes off, he says Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shimon argue, can you burn a sofik together? So you see that according to Rabbi Shua, you're allowed to burn sofik with vadai. Mashiach, according to Rabbi Yossi, he doesn't say that. If you look at the line before, Rabbi Yossi says Tahoya b'fnei atzmo, Tuluya b'fnei atzmo, Tameah b'fnei atzmo. You're not allowed to burn anything together. He doesn't have a machlikas. So our Mishnah is going. That's what Shimon according to Rabbi Yossi, you're allowed to burn sofik with vadai. But Rabbi Yossi himself says you're not allowed to burn sofik with vadai. Very more about this in Rabbi Yossi. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi talking. How can you say that our Mishnah, which says Rabbi Yossi says you're allowed to burn sofik with vadai, it's going to come to Shimon according to Rabbi Yossi. It's Rabbi Yossi speaking. Shimon according to Rabbi Shua. It's Rabbi Yossi speaking. That's what answers meaning. So, but he's trying to argue the Amir. What he's saying to Amir is even the most meikol, which is Rabbi Shimon according to Rabbi Shua, doesn't say your chiddush of bad. Because Amir says you're allowed to burn toy and tommy. If you remember, that was how he started off. Amir says on El Pesach you're allowed to burn toy tuma with tommy tuma. Comes along Rabbi Yossi and says even the most meikol, which is Rabbi Shimon b'shittas Rabbi Yeshua, only allowed sofik and not vadai. That's what the answer is. Rabbi Yossi, the Amir. Rabbi Yossi says to me, "Afilu Rabbi Shimon, ba'alivad Rabbi Yeshua demeikol ki meikol v'tluya v'tmeil. V'tmeil alone, nobody ever holds it out to Torah and Tommy together." Says well another stira. Rabbi Yossi b'chadin avami tuma pischa b'shani asks a stira from tuma to Pesach. He asks, "Miyom Rabbi Yeshua shein ka'acha." Since Rabbi Yeshua says sofik with vadai, you're allowed to burn them together with minu. Chavishol tuma shnei do sofik tuma. Rabbi Lezer, when we say nachas mokav tufa, if it's an exposed place and yechad mokav mutzna, you have to put it in a secluded plot. And if it was yechasen, or if it was open, you have to cover it. If it was in a secluded spot in the Tufa, you should put it in an exposed spot. That means he holds that word. Rabbi Shua never allows you to do anything. If you've got a suffix barrel of tumah, what are you allowed to do? You're allowed to do something to cause it to become tummy. But you're allowed to make it tummy? No. So how come in our Mishnah it says you're allowed to burn suffix tumah without a tumah? That's when our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yeshua, they're allowed to do sofik with vadai. That brisa that says you're not allowed to do a grama to cause a sofik tumah to become tamei, or sofik tumah to male to become vadai tamei, is only going to Rabbi Yossi. Another still, you're allowed to do the grama not with your hands. No, this is what we had before, where a barrel of wine breaks at the top. And by the two getting mixed up, you're not going to be able to eat either. Why? Because the top is Tumah Tahora, the bottom is Chulin Tamein. Chulin Tamein you're allowed to eat, Tumah Tahora you're allowed to eat. But once they get mixed up, you're not going to be able to eat it. if you can save a vis with taro, yatz vim lav, a blazer retain the tetabe valley tamid biyad, not out make it tamid shoyim it tamid biyad. Here we're taking truma, tahora, and making it properly tamid, not sofik, bevadai. What did we answer? Never asked it like this. We asked, why is this not a raya to shittas ramir? But we never asked as a stira b'shittas of Yeshua. So more answers the same answer in the Maisa. Because there's a big loss. There's the loss of wood. In our Mishnah, where it requires you to make 2 bonfires, it's in a small hefset. Here, there, it's going to be a huge hefset. And now we're going to go into one small topic. Let's go very quickly. Tuma tahira, you're allowed to eat. Tuma tamei, you're not allowed to eat. What can you do with tuma tamei? What can you do with it?
Animal? No.
What?
Animal?
Fuel. You can use it for fuel. Now, wine which becomes tummy, suffic tummy, what are you going to do with it? You can't do very much with it because you can't burn it as fuel. It's not such good fuel, wine. But oil is a good fuel. So for truma to become tummy by oil is not such a major loss. By wine, it's a big loss. Now, the Gemara is going to ask that by wine there is something you could do with it, which is to make the room smell nice by putting it on a fire. And the Gemara is going to go back and forth, eventually explain that it's not always so practical and therefore it doesn't work. But that is the next Gemara. The Gemara is going to establish that this heta we had to save the truma wine is only by wine, not by oil. Why is the heta not by oil? Because by oil it's not such a big loss. Why is it not a big loss for the oil to become tummy, truma to become tummy? The answer is you'll just use it as your bonfire, and therefore it's okay. It says, well, where do we see that big loss they do care and a small loss they did not be made? The Tanya, shemen. If it's made out of oil, if you can save it. You're never allowed to make it tummy. Why not allowed to make it tummy? Because it's not such a big loss. Or before by wine we allowed you to make it tummy, because there was a big loss. Says the Gemara, oil, you can burn it. You can pour it over the you used to pour wine over a bonfire, it a very nice smell. If you say, okay, that's a huge loss, because at the end of the day, it's a 99% loss. Just the fact that you can put it, make a nice smell, you can't drink it. Says the one, it's not true. When you buy wine for drinking, pay up to a lug for a seller. When you pour it on the fire to make a nice smell, so you have to use 2. That means that you should pay more for your wine, which is for ziluf, than for your wine, which is for drinking. So you see, it is a valuable thing. As well, we talk about new wine. New wine does make a nice smell. You can let it get old and then make it a nice smell. Also, you'll come to drink it because you'll forget it's too much smell. Oil, you're going to make it a color as well. Yeah, but it takes time. No.
Oil, you've got it, you use it.
I know, but you might come to drink it. In those days, they did used to put the oil in their foods.
Yeah, well, you do it nowadays as well. But you don't generally.
Generally, what does it say that? Here, right? So the was worried like this: that if you're going to allow to have oil which is tummy around your house, eventually you'll come to drink it. So the world says, you'll have to store the oil in the whole keli that you won't come to drink it, you'll only come to burn it. So why do we say the same thing about wine? Pour it into an unpleasant keli, and then that way you'll get old, and that way you'll be able to use it. So why do we say it's a loss? As well as ziluf, koboile, you want to make it to make a nice smell. You put it in an unpleasant cup, it won't make a nice smell later. So for basically the Gemara is answering that by oil it's not a loss. You'll find a way to use it. By wine, you will not find a way to use it, and therefore it is a big loss. Whether we're choishish for takolos, that means whether we're choishish that if we allow you to leave around tumah to male, you might come to a problem. It's a machlokas tana. You have to pull the whole thing as one, like chabila, like one bundle. You have to pull the whole thing out in one go. So if you can use it for your bonfire to make a nice smell, and we're not choishish that what, that you'll come to drink it. I'll pass them. But in the field where people don't have a chance to do ziluf because it's usually in your house, to shafei chaval, pull the whole thing out. But bayis, at home, when you've got the opportunity to make your house smell nice, that's a ziluf. That means it makes a pshor between bisham and bisiluf. Bisham is you have to pull the whole thing out. Bisiluf, so you can keep it. Depends where. Ikadami bechodosh, if it's new wine, where it takes time for it to be able to be used to shafei chaval, pull the whole thing in one bundle. But yoshan tas ziluf in old, you should use it as ziluf because you can use it straight away. Amuloi, chafala from the left top of the page. What did they say to him? What would you say to him? You can't paskan when you come up with a svar which wasn't mentioned by the people who had this before. When one person mentions the concept and he says, he says, no, I'm Meikol, and you say, no, in this case, yes, this case, no, that's one thing. But here, nobody ever talked about fields and houses. Nobody ever talked about new and old wines. You're coming up with a difference which nobody ever mentioned. That's not something we take into consideration. Now, we talked about wine, which falls into the Tumah Tamil. You all actually pointed it out at the time, that if there's 100 times as much Tommy Chulin at the bottom, what will happen? What will the halacha be? Bittul. And then will there be any loss? No. And if that's the case, you're not allowed to save the wine which is coming down with a keli Tommy. Why? Because if you do, you're making it Tommy for no reason. Bishloim, if you can't become bottle, you're saving it for a reason. But hey, what are you saving for? There's no reason. Why? The machlokes, whether you're allowed to save it, is only right. It's a machlokes, but everybody agrees that if it's more than 100, then you're not allowed to save it. Why not allowed to save it? If it's more than 100 of chulin at the bottom, everybody agrees that you're not allowed to save it with Tommy, because it's going to be bottled. So you're not going to have a financial loss by falling it in. So it says, machlokes is if it falls into less than 100. That means you want to catch the wine which is dripping because you don't want to make everything possible and not be able to eat it. That's only if at the end you're not going to be able to eat it. But here, if you're going to be able to, if it's going to become bottle, so that we don't mind. Let's become Taranya. If you can save it. Let it go down, become tummy, and not become tummy with your hat. Now here we have a very, very big problem. Last Kanech was Cheshman Gemara. Rabbi Lezer is the one that holds that what? That you're not allowed to save it. Right? Rabbi Lezer is the one who says that you're not allowed to save it. Rabbi Shua is the one who says you are allowed to save it. In a case where it's going to become bottle, who's being murdered to who? That's right. So you get to get clear. Again, Rabbi Lezer says you're not allowed to save it. Rabbi Shua says you are allowed to save it. But in a case where it's anyway going to be bottle, and therefore there's no financial loss, says Rabbi Shua to Rabbi Lezer, I agree with you that there's no reason to save it, because by saving it, you're not gaining that much. It's going to be bottle, and by saving it, you're making a tumor. So who's being murdered to who? Rabbi Shua to Rabbi Lezer. What's the price of Lezer to Rabbi Shua? It's a paradigmatic thing. How can Rabbi Lezer say such a thing? Rabbi Lezer is the one who holds you can't save it anyway. He's not being murdered anything. Rabbi Shua is being murdered, even though normally I allow you to save it, and in the process make tumor. And the reason I'm allowing you to save it because it's going to be a huge financial loss. Therefore, I'm allowing you to save it with a keli tomei. But in a case where it's not going to be such a financial loss because it's going to fall and be bottled, it's still going to be an episode of financial loss, by the way, because you're going to have to use it as chulin tamein, which not tumah to her. Tumah to her is worth more. And I say it's small financial loss because it's bottled. So therefore, I'm murdered to you. They're not allowed to save it. So you should say murder Rabbi Shua to Rabbi Lezer, not Rabbi Lezer to Rabbi Shua. Says the Gemara, "Hi, murder Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shua, murder Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Lezer, boile." Oh my God, you have to turn it around. Don't turn it around. We're talking about a keli where the inside is toy and the outside is tummy. We're talking about a completely different case. That Rabbi Lezer says that you're allowed to save. If you can save a revius betara, you should save a revius betara. That means if you can save a revius betara, you should save it. Now, what happens if it's a cup where the outside, like this cup, this is tomei and the inside is this side is tomei, but the inside is toy. For example, you got tumah d'rabbanan on the outside, only the outside becomes tomei, not the inside. So, can you save a revius of yain b'tahara if the outside is tomei? What's the chashash? The chashash is you might come to the outside and make it tomei. Now, Rabbi Lezer is the one who's very, very machmir. Rabbi Lezer says you're not allowed to save it. Nevertheless, in such a case, Rabbi Lezer says you're allowed to save it. That is the chiddush of Rabbi Lezer. That in such a case, you're allowed to, even though Rabbi Lezer is the one who's machmir and says you don't save things, but over here he says that you're allowed to, because we're not choishesh. That means in a case where you can save it to how, and the only cup that you have is a cup where the outside is tomei, Rabbi Lezer says you're allowed to, because at the end of the day, you're saving a bit of Hadanach Ulabos, which means to learn it again and again in this world and the next world. In Shemaim, we'll learn it even better. And mitzvah in this world as well, we'll learn it again and again to get it more clarity. I call Shaw. I wonder if you can tell people that it's a whole new sukkah. Maybe we should put it on the group. So, shkoyach for coming. Shkoyach the very, very good Shabbos. Good Chanukah.
Can I try to unplug it from behind? The end of it.